Hello and welcome to Obsessive Audio. Eric here. For the last few days I've been working on a voice chain for voiceovers, spoken word. If you do any kind of podcasting, broadcasting, streaming, audiobooks, advertisements, anything involving the spoken word, I hope that you will find this helpful because I've got the entire process down to 2 plugins, one on the microphone and one on the master bus, one that's specifically designed for broadcasting. So that should be fun. Let's take a quick look at what's going on here. The screen that you're seeing now is vMix. This is just the software that I use to make videos, to do screen captures. This really could be anything, whatever you use. If you use OBS or XSplit, Streamlabs, Ecamm, as long as you can load in plugins. You could also load these into your DAW, or if you're doing editing in Resolve or Premiere, you could load the plugins there too. Point being is that it's down to 2 plugins, and let me show you what we've got going on here. First off, as you can see, vMix does have some built-in sound manipulation tools, a rudimentary graphic EQ, a compressor, a noise gate. They're okay. If that's all you had, you could use these and get somewhere, but I think you're going to find with the plugins, it's just that extra level of control and sound quality. And after trying a bunch of things, the winner in this case for the mic processing is PSP Infinistrip. A couple reasons for this. Number one is just the ability to have this sheer amount of processing going on in one plugin, one graphical interface. So I've got 7 things going on: gain control, expander, some filters, an EQ, a compressor, a de-esser, and a brick wall limiter, just to keep any kind of output from going over 0 before it hits the master bus. Further, it's 0 latency processing, and this is important when you're live. You don't want to have plugins that are introducing tons of latency. It's super important if you're trying to keep cameras in sync with the audio and the video in sync. We'll get to more on that later because this is a rule that I did decide to break a little bit when it came to the master bus, but I think you'll see why that was worth it. So to just basically go over this processing, number one, gain. If a co-host comes on, a guest comes on, or you play a file, whatever it is, if it needs that fast adjustment, right here. Again, it's hard in some of these programs like vMix, OBS. It's kind of hard to get to your VST plugins. It's not like a DAW where you can click on it and it pops up. It's going to be a couple clicks. So once you've opened it up, it's nice to have everything there. And you'd be surprised at how hard it is to actually find plugins that have all of this on the one interface. There's a few, and we'll go over those in honorable mentions. But anyway, Infinistrip for the win. So I've got my gain here. I've got an expander. I think most of us mere mortals are going to be in a home environment or maybe a studio environment, but there will be some kind of noise, some kind of fan noise. Maybe you got neighbors, maybe there's traffic, maybe they're working a jackhammer down the street, who knows? But some kind of noise reduction is usually a good idea to have on hand. Different ways you can go about that noise reduction. You can gate it with a noise gate. Those are kind of hard and kind of abrupt unless you set them really carefully. I much prefer the expander when it comes to noise reduction because it's like a soft gate. You can actually kind of set the ratio at which those very quiet sounds are going to be de-emphasized. And expanders are great. Again, hard to find on just any plugin. Now, there are other fancier noise reduction systems, FFT-based systems. You take a profile of the noise. Those, again, they can introduce quite a bit of latency. And sometimes these Space Monkey artifacts, which I don't find that I get with just standard expanders or even noise gates. Next up, simple high-pass filter just to take out any rumble, reduce the bass a little bit, and control any kind of plosives that might be getting through the windscreen. It's doing a pretty good job. EQ, not much going on here. This is my usual approach to microphones in general, is to find the masking frequencies and try to get rid of them. In this case, it was in the low mids. I identified it around 317 hertz. Like I could actually hear resonances, wolf tones in there, and that's around where they came out. Let me take off this filter so you can hear what I'm talking about. And hopefully now you can kind of hear that muck, that lower mid box, and that sort of thing. So the idea was just to clean it up. Now, where do these sounds come from? It could be anything. Could be your room. It could actually be the microphone. That's surprising to find out that most microphones do have slight resonances, body resonances, either from the grill or the housing. Even really expensive microphones, really coveted, fancy microphones. That it's kind of amazing how often you run into that, where the microphone itself has a resonance. And there are ways to kind of correct that. Special mic holders. You can damp the body, but that's something to be aware of. The other thing I've done here is a move that I almost never do, which is actual cut in the upper mids at 2.38 kilohertz. I guess what I heard, let's turn that off. I think I just heard a bit of a peak, a bit of a kind of a upper nasal peak around that frequency, which also, again, it's going to depend on your application, because if your voice is trying to cut over a bunch of music, let's say, maybe a sports announcer, you've got all this stuff going on in the background, that may be your best friend, just a bit of that kind of extra push on those frequencies. But in the interest of just keeping things a bit smoother and more even, I put that on. Optional again. Next up, compressor. In this case, FET. It's their PSP's FET presser algorithm. Really great. It's a very forward-sounding compressor. Kind of lifts the sound a bit, focuses it in towards the mids and the upper mids. Nice sound. Also keep in mind the beauty of Infinistrip. If you wanted to change the flavor out, it's all up here. There's an opto, for instance, and they've done a good job when you switch models that it kind of keeps the same ratio, keeps the same levels. So really, yeah, there's a slight level difference, but you're just hearing the different flavors that are available to you. So there's the opto VCA. Again, that's a bit of a different sound. I went with the FET. Even here on the preamp, for instance, this is just a straight gain. It's not doing anything, but there are other ones in there, like a 60s preamp, a 70s preamp. With all these preamps, you can add distortion, you can add saturation and coloration. I don't typically do that. My approach to voiceovers is actually to minimize distortion, get rid of distortion that may already be in the mic and the voice and all that. Again, when we get to the master bus, you'll see how that works. Just to finish off here, we've got the de-esser set fairly moderately, 3 to 4 dBs, I guess. Maybe I could work on that because I am hearing some high end getting through. Brick wall limiter. This is, again, just to make sure things aren't going over 0. I don't know vMix very well. If it's a floating point on the mixing engine, probably it is, but just to be safe, let's keep those levels in check with every chance that we get. So there we go, PSP Infinistrip. I will mention some other solutions, honorable mentions that I tried. Omnichannel from Waves, that also has all the stuff built in, your expander and the limiter and de-esser. I was getting a bit more quality out of Infinistrip, though. Maybe just the way that I dialed in Omnichannel, but it'll do it. And we're not talking about a game-breaking difference in sound quality. It's just I felt like I was just getting a bit more quality out of Infinistrip. Another one that worked really well was the Brainworks AMEC 9099 plugin. That was great. It's got the expander operating the way that I like. It doesn't have a de-esser, though. But other than that, it did have everything, including a way to control that final output peak level. A real surprise to me, which I guess it shouldn't have been, was the SSL channel strip, the one from SSL. It's called Channel Strip Volume version 2. That thing was great. That was a super clean sound, super direct, in your face, not adding a lot of distortion, just doing all the right things, all the right compression. Doesn't have the de-esser again, though. So I went with this guy, the Infinistrip, because it's all there, one in your face, and very easy to get at what you need once you call up the GUI here. So let's take a look at the master bus and the secret sauce that's going on here. It's a plugin called Stereo Tool, made by Thimeo, and this is a broadcast-oriented plugin. Basically, this has all of the kind of processing that a radio station would use. It's basically a software replacement for these boxes that they use in the radio stations, the Orbans and the Omnia, Optimon, all that kind of stuff. A lot of processing under the hood here. In fact, there are hundreds and hundreds of variables should people decide to get into that. But I went very simple here. I used their auto gain control, one multiband, a wideband, and a special clipping kind of limiter. Now the clipping algorithms in these are called advanced clipping, and they're supposed to actually reduce distortion. It's weird. I don't quite understand it. The compressors themselves are based on fluid dynamics in terms of the math that they use. So there's some pretty crazy processing going on here. Stereo Tool's now at version 10. So it's a very developed piece of software. The one caveat I had, and why I hadn't used this live before, was because of the latency. Now, this plugin sounds best at 4,096 samples. It needs a lot of look ahead and a lot of latency when the modules talk to each other. But then I found out you can reduce it. You can reduce it to 2056, 1024, and 512, et cetera, et cetera. They say that 1024 is probably a good compromise between quality and latency. And if you're running 44.1 kilohertz and you've got 1024 samples, that is roughly 23 milliseconds. So you're still talking less than one frame at 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second. So it's probably not enough to really throw off your production depending on what you get. Something I'm still going to have to keep my eye on. But listening to the sound of it, I'd say it's worth it. Let's go back to the main processing overview here. We've got a multiband, and you can see the voice is just kissing the multiband here. And what that's doing is kind of evening out the spectral response, sort of flattening down any kind of peak energy that would poke through that might start to sound uneven. There's also a wideband compressor after that. Again, it's not hitting very much. There's an auto gain control. We're going to put some music through this, and I'll show you a little bit more about how that works. What else is cool about this? There's a phase rotator. Phase rotation is an interesting thing. It comes from radio days, and the idea is what it helps you do is it deals with asymmetry in the waveform. The positive part of the waveform is sometimes much louder than the negative part. That's just a facet of the human voice through a microphone. Those, especially male voices, those waveforms are going to be very asymmetrical, and the phase rotation basically kind of helps center that. So by the time you're hitting compressors and limiters, clippers, whatever down the line, it's a more even signal. You've got a couple more decibels of headroom before, the distortion kicks in, intermodulation, all that stuff. So it's really, it was really critical back in the days where they're trying to jam everything in to fit on this transmitter. So it's also helpful in normal digital podcast world. I do find it gives a little bit of improvement. Another feature, they've got a declipper here. It's very advanced. Even if I'm not actually clipping the microphone, I still like running it. I hear that it does clean things up just a little bit. So those are some of the features of Stereo Tool. I'm going to link to the web page so you can check it out. Again, I have been using this on post-production for over a year. It's great. I was just scared to put it in a live context until I found out that you can reduce the latency. So hopefully that's going to be a good trade-off, and it's going to work really well. Let's just go back to our processing page here. I want you to take a look at this AGC here, auto gain control. So what we're going to do is just introduce some music, and we're going to go back. You can see here, the music's just ticking off that AGC. And then when I add my voice to it, it pushes everything down. There's a little bit of a ducking effect that's kind of nice. Also, you can see that if I crank this up, you can get so loud with Stereo Tool just by feeding it more volume. Even though that auto gain control is pulling down, it's still louder. So basically what Stereo Tool is doing is just sort of helping along any of those rough spots that might occur in a live production. Keeping the volumes a little more balanced, keeping your spectrum a bit more balanced. Gives you just a little bit more play in a live setting, and still keeping things on track. I've got a target of minus 14 dB lifts, which is what YouTube likes. That's also what Spotify likes. And probably will end up a few dBs louder than that, but I don't really see that as a problem. A dB or two over, they'll just turn you down by that much. And anyway, I hope this is helpful. I hope you can see how Stereo Tool and PSP Infinistrip are working together to get a pretty solid professional sounding voice that you can use live or you can use it in post-production. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. I hope it was entertaining. We'll see you next time on Obsessive Audio.